Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cardinal Careers podcast. I'm here with the career development team. My name is Jessica Weicha. We have Heidi Nunez, Barbara Faust, and Margaret Stacy Duffy. And today we have a special guest, Julie Carballo, who is the Director of First Generation Initiatives at North Central College and frequently known as one of the top networking people within our college. She knows everyone. And today we're going to be talking all about networking, what it is, how to do it. And so kind of starting off, networking is a really common term that's thrown out there. You got to go out and network, you got to build your network. But what does it mean to actually network, and how do you get started?
I can jump in here because I think that one of the most important things is to dispel the myth of what networking is. And I don't know if people still think this way, but at least when I was going through college and graduate school, you would often think about the networking events where you're literally kind of passing out business cards and making small talk and chit chat and introducing yourself and things like that. So I just, maybe my answer isn't about what networking is, but I want to really talk about what networking isn't. And I think that number one, right off the bat, I want to make sure that that's not what we're talking about, because it's rarely what we're going to be sending students into those types of situations unless you're, going to a conference or an association event. There's so much more to networking than just those networking events, and so many more effective ways to network versus just going to those events and introducing yourself and passing out the business card. So I want to start off with that. That is not what we're talking about, right? Right?
I agree, Heidi. And I would also like to say that for me, networking is simply building relationships. It's just about connecting with other people. And every day of life is really networking. So if people think back to somebody that they have known since elementary school, or somebody they met through a job that they previously have, or somebody they met at their cousin's house one time at an event, every single person you meet is just part of building your network. Sometimes you want to be more intentional about it for certain reasons, but every opportunity in life every interaction in life is a potential networking opportunity. I think one of the other things that some people are worried about when they hear about networking is that I'm only developing a relationship with this person because I need something from them. And so that feels awkward sometimes for people. And so I just think that it's helpful for students to think about that everybody I meet is an opportunity to build a relationship with and learn something about life from, or learn something about North Central from. And so I just like to even replace the word networking with building relationships with people while you're part of this North Central community and beyond.
That's such a great point, because I think that may be one of the reasons why people feel so awkward with the network, because they feel like it's an ask. You're always reaching out to ask for something. But the reality is, if you're taking this approach of relationship building, is that you're giving too, right? You are also offering whatever it is that you can offer, right? So maybe it's your own experience, expertise, advice, insight, your own connections if you have it as well. But it is intended to be a give and take. And you may not be in a position right now to give so much, but you may in the future, right? So I think that's an important thing too in terms of relationship building. It's not just today. This is definitely ongoing.
I know as a current college student, when I was first told, you got to network with people, I didn't really know what that meant. And a really simple thing that I did that made it less intimidating was I started with my professors and upperclassmen. Like, you really underestimate them, but your professors have worked in the field. They know people who've graduated who are working in the field. And, just stopping by for office hours, asking questions, you could just be like, hey, like, this is what I'm thinking about doing. I'm thinking about going to grad school, and your professors will gladly listen all the time. So I always encourage people, start there and start with your upperclassmen, people who are seniors in your major. They've gone through what you've gone through. They're about to start working. So just start off with being friends with them. And I have a lot of upperclassmen now in my major who are my friends, but also are my network. And so I feel like it's really nice and intimidating, this not intimidating, to just start off there, to kind of build those relationships. And then you can start to branch out to, network professionals and other people.
Barb, I think you were going to say something.
I was. And I think that it's similar to what you said and Julie have said, is that the impression about networking is that you're asking for a job, that you're asking for an internship. And really, it is about the developing a relationship, but it's also the exchange of information. So typically what you're asking for is guidance or information, whether or not it's about an industry or a career. And then in the course of the conversation, that's where you may learn about opportunities, or somebody might say, hey, you know what, I'm in communications major, and hey, my cousin works at NPR or something like that. It sort of develops in that kind of way. I think the other thing too is this belief that somehow, you have to be an extrovert to be good at networking. And I'll have to tell you, some of the wonderful relationships that I've met with people have been in places you would never think about sort of networking, standing in the checkout line at Jewel or Target, and when you just start talking to somebody, or, having my car repaired and somebody noticed that I had a North Central, hoodie on, and we just start having these conversations and sharing information. And then you find that you have something in common. And for students who may be concerned about the networking piece, is I would just say also just be yourself. What you bring to any type of networking or connection are your interests, your strengths, and your skills. And everybody has something to share. And that often as a student, people want to help you. They're really, they want to be in the role of possibly sharing information or being a mentor. And you'll never know unless you have that conversation and you sort of ask for the opportunity. So
I guess,
I was gonna jump in and just say, because Barb, you sparked that other situation that I think many students, people, not just students, everyone could potentially find themselves in, that unexpected situation where you are in a place or in proximity with somebody who may have opportunity for you, right? And it happens everywhere. It doesn't happen in that networking event like it used to. It still does in some places, but it can happen at the checkout line in Jewel. Hear so many stories from students over and over and over again that they're in their part-time work, or they're in a traveling or whatever, and they have an opportunity to connect with somebody. And what we tend to tell people is that you have to be prepared for that. You can't get caught off guard. This is why it's important to have the networking conversation, because it is important to be yourself, but it's also important to be prepared for an introduction. Whether you're in your part-time job at Jewel traveling, who are you? What are you doing? What are you looking for? What are you pursuing? Because you never know who you're going to ride up the elevator with and who might have that opportunity for you. So we call that the elevator pitch, and we do have resources for that. But I just wanted to call, this is my commercial. I'm always putting commercials out there for our resources.
And handshake. Okay.
And
it wouldn't be a presentation unless we talked about handshake.
Oh, I'll introduce that one in a minute. Julie, you have to say something.
I would like to follow up on what Barb said and what you said. And Jessica has probably participated in this through Cardinal First. We do different little networking activities. So I like to think of networking not even when you're looking for an opportunity. You don't have to be looking for an opportunity to be building relationships with people. So one of the scenarios we role play many scenarios of really just starting a conversation with someone. So I think Jessica was at these workshops last year, but we have them. You're standing in line at Target. Put your hands on the cart. The person in the line, it's a long line, so you've got plenty of time. The person in the line next to you has a North Central College sweatshirt on, and you don't know if they're a parent, an employee, an alum, or what, but we talk about how for the rest of your life, anytime you see anything North Central off this campus, it's a networking opportunity. And we practice saying, hi, I see your North Central College sweatshirt. What's your connection to North Central? I'm a student there. And just as simple as that, and to be able to start conversations. And we do another one where you're standing in line waiting for your food at ABP, and the person that ordered right in front of you is in one of your classes, and you've looked at each other for 10 weeks and never said a word to each other. How can you start a conversation with them about the test that's coming up next week? And so how it's about just simply starting conversations. And if you notice something about somebody, to say it, and that those are all opportunities. And then later, you know, you might see them again, or you might not, or 2 years from now, you might end up working at the same place. But I think that all of those opportunities, when you see a North Central College attire off our campus, it's a missed opportunity if you don't approach that person and say, I'm a student at North Central. Did you go there too? Or do you work there? And so just simple connections. And I also have heard the stories of students saying, I mentioned that while I was waitressing to somebody, and they told me about an opportunity that they knew for me. So I think that's very true, and that you don't have to be actively looking for a job or anything. It's just good to meet people, learn people's stories, learn about about their lives, and you'll learn something.
Right.
I like how you really show that it's like building too. It could start off from someone in your class, and then someone with a North Central hoodie. And then, eventually when you are in the professional world and you are attending conferences or events, you know how to spark those conversations because you did them in college. And another thing that I would do a lot is I was deciding between going like the actuarial path or computer science and, doing coding. And it's like people in my class were so great to just talk to and be like, hey, like you had this internship here and here, what do you do as a person who's coding versus, oh, what do you do as someone who's an actuary? And I think that's a really good stepping stone to kind of start off with. That's a lot less intimidating to build those skills.
So I'm a super visual person, and as everyone's talking, I'm picturing a literal net. And I think I want to call back to something Jessica said early, like by leaning on your classmates and your faculty, is that something that I want to just say for anyone who might be listening. You already have a network, even if you don't think you do. Size wise, it's probably going to be a bit smaller if you're early in your college career. And then there's folks, probably everyone on this call has a bit of the network is growing and growing. But I think that's something to think about, and then thinking too. And I'm curious to get other folks' thoughts. Something that I'm thinking about is quality versus quantity. Is it one or the other? Is it both? But thinking about having a really strong connection with someone and having multiple conversations with that one person versus a lot of just, hey, nice to meet you. Oh, you're so-and-so, you work somewhere. That's so nice to meet you, moving right along. So I'm kind of thinking about those two things, but I'm picturing this big net that you're literally growing and growing and growing.
Margaret, you know what you sparked for me is that how do I say this? One thing that I think I learned going through my graduate program was that it's the connections that you don't know yet that are going to be the most valuable to you. So as you're growing your network, right? As you're growing your net, you're constantly trying to reach those connections that you don't have connections to yet. And it's those weak connections or that gap that's going to be the most important to you in getting that next step, right? So it is important to start with the network that you have. That's going to be number one. So your family, your friends, your neighbors, your peers, your faculty, and developing deep relationships in these areas are going to be important so that you can develop those mentorships and that's what's going to help you connect to those weak ties or those gaps. I think that's a long-winded response, but that's one of the things that I realized when I was in graduate school, that yes, your network is very important, but how do you get to those connections that you don't have a connection there yet, right? Like I wanna work in this area. I don't have that connection. How do I get there? And it's my network that's going to help me get there. I don't know. But I think that's an important notion and message too for those of us who feel like I'm not well networked. I don't know a lot of people. I don't have any connections in that area. That's the purpose of what we're talking about here, right? Is trying to make connections in order to get there. So sometimes I think we feel a little bit nervous about the fact that we don't know too many people. But this is what we're trying to do, right? Start with what you know, with who you know.
How would you suggest making those connections now that everything, is online and is going to be online for a little bit longer? If I'm a student, sometimes it feels like, oh, I'm just sitting at home doing my classes. But I'm a senior or junior and want to make those connections. What's some advice you have for students?
I think that's a great question, Jessica. And even you've talked a lot about talking to the upper class students in your major. Some majors facilitate that a little bit better than other majors. So I think that's another thing to let students know, that if you are a first year or a sophomore and you don't know upper class students in your major, to reach out to a professor in that major and say, is there a senior that you think would be willing to talk to me? Or to reach out to career development, or to somebody on campus, because people can help facilitate those connections if you don't know an upper class student that you would like to talk to. And I think that one thing that I want to make sure everyone knows about is that North Central College has an alumni group on LinkedIn with more than 3,000 members. So when you get to the point of developing a LinkedIn profile, and I would say you want your LinkedIn profile to be fully developed. So probably into your junior year before maybe you would connect with this alumni group, but that would be a way to connect with other people from North Central. So I think that's an opportunity. I think following professional organizations on their social media connects you to a lot of people rather instantly in that field. And I'll let the career development people talk, but I'm sure that they would connect you for informational interviews as well, because it is hard. I have a son that pursued a career in accounting and nobody in our family has ever done anything like that. So, but if you talk to other people who can help get you, connected to people in that field, and building off of Heidi's point is it's the connections that aren't as strong yet that might later prove to be the most important. And it's connections that you don't even know. So I'm going to give an example of when Heidi and I first met. She was working at another institution and we were both working with student veterans, and we met at an event, started talking to each other, stayed in touch because of that type of work. And then later when North Central posted this position that I thought she would be great at, I shared it with her. Well, she and I never had any intent in any of our conversations that we would ever work together, it wasn't, neither one of us were at the time when we first met. So I think and that goes back to my point of every interaction is just building your network with people. And whether you get a recipe that you might want to try or a place you might want to go visit, it doesn't always, any conversation could end up leading to an opportunity down the road. And one other example I'll give is when one of my sons was in college and he went to apply for an internship, and he found out after he applied that the father of somebody he played basketball with 5 years before worked at that company. And just because and so my son did reach out to him to say, I've applied for this internship, but just because my son on the basketball court showed that he was hardworking, coachable, a team player, that somebody was able to go to bat for him. So that's not anything about what his accounting skills were later on, but be your authentic self. I think somebody already said that on here. We were talking about that earlier. Be your authentic self and be somebody that people think that you have the skills we need. We can, what you don't know about this job, we could train you for, but we know you're hardworking, you're coachable, you want to learn, you're resilient, whatever it is. People are noticing those things about you. So those people will be able to help you, as reach out to them. So if my son was very reluctant to reach out to this person, 5 years later, and said, just so you know, I've applied for this internship. So again, never did he imagine when he was playing high school basketball that that later on he might reach out to someone, but it all goes back to you just have no idea. And when you get to be my age, you'll see at how often your paths cross with people that you might meet at a conference for one day, and then 10 years later, you're working on something together, or you hear of opportunities that you're, sharing with each other. So I think that it's surprising the small world, the small world story over and over, but it's very true.
And it just goes to show how important it is to make sure that you're always putting your best foot forward. Mm-hmm. Even if, it's not as immediately clear in the moment what your future relationship is going to be. A perfect example, and as our situation, as you just mentioned here, Julie, but you never know. So you always want to put your best foot forward and leave a good impression. Mm-hmm. Back to Jessica's point about, how do you do that in this virtual world? And I think it's so much more important right now that our digital footprint is just everywhere, that we are being mindful of what that footprint that we're leaving. And I think an easy thing to do is, I think I mentioned it during like an Ask Me Anything in the fall. But I think an easy thing for you to do is take some time and just do a Google search of your name in your city or your name in your school, and see what comes up for you, right? And that includes taking a look at what impression you think people are getting from you from your social media. Even if you think that your Facebook and your Instagram, your Twitch and your TikToks are personal, and they should not be viewed as your professional identity. That is still your footprint. That is still the impression that you're putting out in the world. And so we have to make sure that we're mindful of that as well. Julie mentioned LinkedIn, and I like to tell students that if you don't have a LinkedIn account yet, it's a really good way for you to begin to manage your professional reputation out in the virtual world, because you get to be in control of the narrative. What do you want people to think about you? And what do you want people to say about you? What do you want them to connect to you? You literally have the opportunity to put that in your bio. So when people search you because you applied for a job, or because you're applying for a scholarship, or for whatever reason, you have the opportunity to put it out there, right? Heidi Nunez, higher education professional, right? That is what I want people to think of me. That's what I'm going to put out there. Before I mute myself here for a minute to let other people talk, I think you set me up to talk about Handshake, so I'm going to take it. I, I have to. I think for students who are starting out and thinking, I don't really know how to get started in this networking world. I'm nervous about it. I don't know how to start an email about this. I want to offer to you to get your feet wet with Handshake, because this is where you are going to have your first opportunity to search for and network with your peers to begin building your network. So Jessica mentioned talking to your upper class students, your juniors and your seniors. And with Handshake, once you build your profile and make it public, you have an opportunity to search students who are maybe in your major, or who are in a student organization that you're interested in, or who have worked with or interned with a company that you're interested in. So you can search these students and message them. And what we hear from students is that it's a very successful way to make a connection. If you have a reason to message them, like, hey, you're in my class. You're in an internship that I'm interested in. You're a marketing major. I'm thinking about going into that major. What do you recommend? I see that you took this class. What did you think about it? People are very willing to have a conversation with you and make a connection with you this way. Once you've networked with folks within North Central College, you should know that with Handshake, you can also network with people outside of North Central. So any college that has Handshake, right? University of Chicago, DePaul University, Stanford, if you want to connect with any of these folks, you can. So you can begin to use Handshake if you're starting to get your feet wet in that networking world. I'm going to mute myself for a minute and let people talk because I'm taking over here.
Also, like building off of what Heidi said, Handshake's a really good tool when you're first starting out. I used LinkedIn once I got a little kind of towards like senior year, and when you can post like, hey, I got an internship opportunity, and just posting things like that, or saying, hey, I got a Bloomberg certification, or hey, I passed something, is really helpful in kind of building that network, because people will then like comment and like your post, and then you can connect with them. Or once you're connected with them, if someone posts that they got a promotion, just commenting congratulations, is a way to kind of maintain that network and to kind of connect with other people, because those posts kind of get shared everywhere, which something unfortunately Handshake doesn't have, is like posts like that. It's tricky because you have to say the right things, you have to make sure you're posting things appropriately. But that's one tip that I learned is liking stuff and commenting on things is a really good way to kind of build it, because if there's someone you want to connect with and they posted something, you could first comment on their post that you saw and then send that connect, so that they're more aware of who you are, what you've done. So that's my little networking tip that I've learned along the way.
I think as a simple, like kind of maybe taking what you both said and sharing it in a different way, is just put it out there. If there's a way you want to network, a specific industry you want to network in, like, hey, I'm thinking about going into, I'd love to explore the idea of a career in radio or a career in whatever it might be. Put that out there. I think even just saying that to your peers, saying that to the current network you do have, to your faculty, to us in career development, whoever you're talking to. Heck, I've done that. I did that in grad school. I made a Facebook post because that's my network. And I said, I'm really, interested in working in higher ed, and I'm wondering if anyone has potential folks I could chat with. And it worked. So I think just putting it out there, your current network will help you grow that network. So that's kind of the simple how-to I would offer.
So then another question that I hear students say a lot, and that I've struggled with as well, is, you have this network. How do you maintain this network? People always say, make sure you're following up with people, keeping in touch with people. But what does that mean? Am I emailing them every month? Am I emailing them every week? Am I like sending them things? Am I giving them updates? Like, what does it mean to kind of maintain that network and to follow up with people?
I have to chime in on this one, because I think that this right here is this period, right? Like, I think the winter break, the holiday season, the new year is always a really great time for you to reach out to people whom you haven't chatted with in a long time, right? So typically you'd be following up or maintaining your network with updates or just some relevant reason to connect with someone. Hey, got a new job. Hey, looking for a job. Heard you got a new job. Congratulations. So there's always some kind of reason to connect, but most of the time there isn't, right? Your network is so huge. You often don't have those unique opportunities to start that conversation. And so this time right here, like the holiday season and the new year, tends to be a good time to reach out to someone and just say warm wishes, thinking of you, best wishes for a new year, or I haven't talked to you in some time. I'd love to catch up. It's been a year since we've connected, right? So I think this is a good time for you to just use this excuse or opportunity to reach out. And either just stay on their radar or ask for a follow-up conversation. And that follow-up conversation, I want to say, doesn't always have to be an ask. This goes back to the relationship building. Part of, I would say, my tip for networking is that don't make the conversation about you, particularly when you're just maintaining your network. Ask about them. How are you? How's your family? How are you liking your new job, or whatever it is? Let them talk about themselves. You're showing that you really care about them. You're developing an interest in them. You're making them feel good about the conversation that they're having with you. So just ask them questions about them. And that's it. That's all you really need to do. You don't have to feel stressed or pressured to have a big update about yourself. They may likely ask you questions about you, and you should be ready for that. But when you're reaching out for a coffee or a virtual coffee, just expect to ask for updates about them.
I think that that's great advice, Heidi. And I think it's the same way for building relationships when you begin at your part-time job, and then when you begin in the professional world, is just getting to know the people that you work with and checking in with them, not for any benefit for yourself, but just because it's good to know and to be a part of that community. So if you heard somebody say that their family member was having surgery, to follow up and say, how did that go? If you hear a professor say, we're not having class on Friday because I'm presenting at a conference, then to follow up with that professor the next time you go to class to say, how did your conference go? What was your presentation about? And it just listening to things that people say and following up is one simple way to follow up in relationships with people. And students that are in Cardinal First will know that we build this into the program too. But I think a great way, and I try to do this myself, is just to reflect periodically, at least once a year, on people that have been an important part of your journey, like in terms of mentoring, pushing you, inspiring you, encourage you. I still, at least once a year, send an email to the person who was the vice president who asked me to get involved with first gen students, because that was a great pivot in my career. But so in Cardinal First, we ask at the end of different points, at the end of the first semester, first year, end of sophomore year, to reflect on three people that have been three faculty or staff that have been a positive part of your North Central experience, because it's human nature to really be irritated and go to bed on those course evals or whatever on things that didn't really meet your needs. But I think it's a really important personal and professional habit to develop, just taking time to say, you know what, that class was so important in me being in this major, and I just want them to know that. Or the way that professor was so critical of my writing is what got me to where I am now, because I would not have worked on it the way that I did. So I think at this time, while we have a 51-day winter break, students, I would encourage you to take time. You would go back to 3 teachers you had in junior high or high school and take 5 minutes to send them an email to say, I'm a college junior studying this. You're part of the reason I'm here. And that's, would be maintaining your network, following up with somebody. You'd also be inspiring them to continue to do great work with people. But I wouldn't, any of the students that are juniors and seniors, if you can think back to a professor that you had during your first year that really inspired or influenced you, or if you had a professor this past semester, this was challenging for everybody this past semester. So now grades are in, you're not doing it for any reason other than to say, I appreciate what you did to make this challenging semester a little bit better. I think that those are great ways to follow up with people and recognize people that have inspired, supported, encouraged you while you're navigating your college experience.
Yeah, gratitude goes a long way. I think just making those connections just by being appreciative of the experience definitely goes a long way. And I think so that sparks a question for me, right? So I definitely do appreciate when I get feedback from people about something that they liked. Again, that strategy to networking is helpful. If you don't make it about yourself, you make it about the person, that you're automatically developing a good rapport with that person. But I'm curious if you guys have thoughts about how you like to be approached, how you like for your networks to stay connected with you. And I'll share, since you were talking, Julie, about reaching back out to folks who have been impactful to you, maybe this is not true for everybody, but I do appreciate when students do just kind of stop by or check in and let me know how things are going, give me an update if they want to celebrate with me, or if they just want to kind of just say, oh, this such and such happened, and now I'm struggling with this. I do appreciate that. That's relationship building to me. If you're just passing by and you want to say hi, and I'm on my way to class and I just wanted to stop by, that's positive, I think, relationship building. It doesn't always have to be a big update, but when you do have one and you share it, I appreciate that, and I'll remember you, and I'll think positively of you, ups and downs, when you're struggling as well. If you're struggling and you came by to ask a question about how do I navigate this, or I don't know how to deal with that, I appreciate that as well. I think that is a good way to network with me. I appreciate that you were reflective enough to think about when you're down and what to do and what's my next step going to be. So at least for me, as being a part of someone's network, I do appreciate when people reach out to me in those ways.
You know, Heidi, that was a really great point. And I'm going to take it a little bit of a step further, is that I'm open to networking with everybody. What can be really helpful is when somebody reaches out to me on LinkedIn, is that they personalize the outreach. So I receive a lot of requests, I'd like to join your LinkedIn network, but I don't know that person. So I go to their profile, I look at that, and I'm looking for the sort of the connection. Is this random? Is somebody just doing this because we went to the same, university, we work at the same, college? So if you can personalize it a little bit, I think it goes a really long way, particularly if you're reaching out to somebody who may have a really large network, or is somebody that maybe you really admire, or someone who have who's going to get a lot of these requests. The more you personalize it, I think the greater the chance you're going to get a positive response.
Also, kind of building on what Barb said, another thing that really helped me was having someone actually introduce me to someone else, because it made it a lot less intimidating. I remember being at like a volunteer day for actuaries for high schoolers, and the speaker knew my professor, and so my professor pulled me in, was like, "Oh, you want to be in consulting? He's in consulting." And that's a connection to this day that I keep and that helped me get a job. And so I've had a lot of times where I've reached out to a professor and I'm just like, "Hey, I want someone who's doing so and so, and I just want to talk more." And they're more than willing to reach out and connect me with someone. And they makes it a little more personal too, as like Barb said, because then when I connect on LinkedIn, I can be like, "Hey, I spoke with so and so and they suggested that I reach out to you." And I've had people do that to me, and it works out really well.
I love that. I'm going to tie this full circle to the beginning, and that makes me think, when Heidi, you brought up like it is a give and take, and if you have something to give, which you might not in your early career as much to give, whether that be advice or an idea or a good book to read, but you probably do have something to give. But what I wanted to say, kind of going off Jessica's point there, is helping others make those connections is something you can do. And I wanted to say, I think that's, Julie, you're so good at that. Like, you did that for me. And anytime I'm in the room, you're so good at just saying, "Margaret, have you met so-and-so? They work here, and Margaret works here." And just even that is so helpful, especially for those of us who aren't as super extroverted. And I can do those things, and I do those things, but when someone helps make that connection, things just feel so much more relaxed, and I feel more confident. And it's a lot easier to then go, "Oh, cool, you are a professor in actuarial science. It's so nice to meet you." So I just wanted to say that's something that I think anyone can do that for their peers too, whether that's introducing, a peer to another peer in the same major and maybe they haven't met yet, or to a faculty member, or whatever it might be. That's something you can give, is helping other people build their relationships and build their networks.
I think that's very true. And I think it starts, and this is one of the other role plays we do in Cardinal First, with if you're talking to someone and another person comes up and you're the one that knows both people, and we role play how to do that introduction, so that, and as opposed to leaving the person standing there awkwardly wondering, what the relationship is. And then it goes on into the workplace. And I go back to, start conversations with people in your neighborhood, the people that live one house and two houses and three houses away from you. whether or not you ever think that it will lead to a job, it's just part of being in a community, and it's about the relationship building and connecting with people, learning their stories. Maybe you're going to learn that somebody needs help with their groceries, and that is something you could do for them. And it's not always just about doing things that are going to advance you in your career. It's just about getting connected to other people, and that might help you to, determine interest or career interests or career opportunities. But it's also just about getting experience doing that. And then, the more you start conversations with people that you don't know, we talk about conversation starters, like practicing what are conversation starters, and which is, what's one that you can always, what are your go-tos, and what topics of conversation can you bring up when you're at some of these events when it's a little bit awkward, or at the Cardinal First workshops. Again, we always have topics of conversation while we eat on the PowerPoint. So if there is a lull at a table, people can go to those if they want, but that's something a skill that we all want to develop, that we have a few go-to conversation starters. And a great one, to go back to what Heidi said, is to say, so tell me what's going well in your week. Tell me what you have going on. So you don't need to come in with, knowing the latest of everything to share, or you don't have to come in with any brilliant updates about yourself, but to say, so what are you doing over the week off, or what's been the most challenging part of your week? Anything. So I think that just starting conversations with everybody and connecting people to others. I have just always liked doing that, and I like listening to people and say, oh, you need to meet so-and-so on our campus. But that also emphasizes the point of, sharing, reaching out to somebody when you're struggling or when you're celebrating, and letting somebody on campus know, so that those connections can be made. And I also liked what the career development team earlier this year, when we did a workshop, said, you can come to us and say, I don't know what questions to ask. I need you to guide the conversation, but here's what is going on. And I think that's a really important message for faculty and staff to share with students, that please come to my office and we'll have a conversation, and we can guide it if you need to. So I think that all faculty and staff on our campus would be happy to do that for students. And so please take advantage of that, students.
A quick little tip that Julie reminded me of, as she was talking about conversation starters, is when someone asks you, how are you? Don't ever just say good. I see so many people just going, I'm good. But then the conversation ends. Say, I'm good. And, last week I got a new puppy. And, I just finished up finals. And, I always add a sentence after that to start that conversation. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of people do, is they just go, I'm good, but that ends it. You want to kind of give them something to help you going. And so I also wanted to ask you guys, what's some common mistakes you see students do, or some mistakes you've done as you've networked throughout your careers?
I'll share a quick one while you're all thinking. And Jessica, I want to tell you that is a brilliant point. A really important point of, any question you're asked, whether it's how are you or not, any question, respond with more than a one-word response and try to ask something back to keep the conversation going. A mistake that I made, that I will warn all of you if you are about to create a LinkedIn profile, is I was creating mine for the first time late at night, and I was just trying to hurry up and get through the initial prompt so I could set up my profile. And LinkedIn will ask you, do you want us to connect to all your contacts in your email? And I hit yes, and I regretted that, because it wasn't people that it wasn't the way that I wanted to build my network on LinkedIn. So be careful when you're creating your LinkedIn account for the first time, and read all those prompts. And I would also encourage you, just like in Handshake, to keep your settings private until you're ready to display your profile. So keep the settings to private till you have it exactly the way you want it. Not forever, but at least for your initial presentation.
I'll share quickly less of a mistake, more just like best practices. If you have a call set up or a meeting set up, or you're working over email, don't reschedule 10 times. Be prompt. If you set something up, make that follow through. I think that's something I learned when I overtaxed myself and scheduled myself, and I was stressed when I was in the job search. And I had to kind of learn the hard way. You can just as easily burn a bridge as you can make a connection. So, if you are feeling overwhelmed and you don't really want to have a phone call with someone you haven't met yet, you don't have the mental energy that week, don't set it up, or say, hey, maybe next week. But yeah, just follow through, be professional, and remember, it goes both ways. They want to help you, but also they might, if you don't follow through or you don't email back because you realize like, this just doesn't seem that useful for me right now, they might not be there when and if you do realize like, ooh, that might have been a good connection to have. This might be awkward coming back from. So follow through. Don't reschedule 14 times. Be intentional about what you're able to do if you're setting something up.
And I'll share a common mistake. A mistake for me is very related and not following up at all, right? Like the best way to burn a bridge with somebody is not following up and not maintaining your network and not staying in contact with that person. Because honestly, we've talked about, being a little bit on the quieter side or being an introvert or something like that. And one of those things is it does take a lot of mental energy to have those conversations. And even if it's an email or even if it's reaching out on LinkedIn, it does take a lot of mental energy for you to think about, what am I going to say? How am I going to introduce myself? What am I going to talk about? And it can make you feel like putting it off. And then it'll make you feel like, okay, I waited too long. And coming back from that is even harder, because then you have to go through the tougher energy of recapping and reintroducing potentially. And it just takes it, you're digging yourself into kind of a bigger hole. So as awkward and as tough as it is for you to manage those networks right now, it'll make it so much easier a month later or a year later when you want to reach back out again. So I think for me, I would say doing the work of maintaining your network is what I would say what you need to learn from my mistakes.
And I think for me, Heidi, you just said it really nicely. And I think Margaret also said this, it's quality over quantity. Sometimes when you're on LinkedIn and you see somebody has 250 or 500 or 500 plus, connections, and you're like, oh, I don't have that many. And really what you want to be able to do is sort of start with those quality connections that you can maintain, that you can follow up. And then you sort of build from there. And, I think the other mistake, again, we've talked about this, is feeling like you don't have anything to bring to the table. Everybody has something that they can share, that they can talk about. You're sharing yourself, and people, you're asking about them, you're inquiring about them. And I think just sort of going back to the basics, I think is just really important. So it's fun.
You guys all had some really good tips and some good insights, but I think we're hitting up on time. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Julie, for being our guest and sharing a bit of your knowledge. And we hope you tune into our podcast next week.
Thank you, everyone.